Okay. So just wave on me when you want me to start. So good afternoon, everybody. Let me welcome all of you here in this classroom, and also let me welcome all of those who are joining us online for the webinar, which was made available thanks to Council of Europe Advocacy Week. We are now going to talk about plagiarism detection, about the methods, about algorithms which are implemented in the plagiarism detection tools. So then we are going to talk also about these tools and how these tools are embedded within institutional policies. So it will be the third topic of my presentation, plagiarism policies, or better, academic integrity policies. And after that, we will have second presentation, which will be done by Shiva and Salim. So, plagiarism detection. First, let me tell you a couple of words about myself, about my background. How did I get to the topic of plagiarism and academic integrity? So the very first initiative which led me to deal with academic integrity was the project called Impact of Policies for Plagiarism in Higher Education across Europe, which was an European Union funded project between years 2010 and 2013. I was already involved by that time in the development of the technical tool, which we decided to develop at our university, our internal plagiarism detection tools. But within this project, I think we call it IFI project, acronym there, I came across also the policy aspect of plagiarism, that it is not only about the technical issues, about the technical solutions, but you have to have also the processes behind. Quite important part of this lecture comes from the literature review I was intensively working on this spring. It was basically 4 months full-time job. And it was already presented at the conference in Turkey. Now I extended it and adopted it to the feedback I got. So I reviewed plenty of papers about methods, about algorithms on plagiarism detection and similarity analysis in the natural language. And regarding plagiarism policies, I am involved in a couple of projects. First is the follow-up project of the IFI project, Southeast European Project on Policies for Academic Integrity, which explored academic integrity policies in former Yugoslavia and Albania. Now, together with colleagues from Mendel University and Coventry University, we are working on a project on academic integrity in Caucasus, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. And I'm also coordinator of the quite big international project, European Network for Academic Integrity. I work as an academic integrity coordinator at Faculty of Business and Economics at Mendel University in Czechia, and I am member of steering group of Pan-European Platform for Ethics, Transparency and Integrity in Education, which was established by the Council of Europe. And its aim is to promote academic integrity in all Council of Europe's member states. So basic questions for today's lectures are, at first, what is possible on the technical level? What the systems which claim to detect plagiarism can technically do? What are the technical methods for plagiarism detection? We will go deeper into some of them to understand how they work, and it will then help the users of these tools help to understand the output of those systems, which is related to the second question, what is actually implemented, and if the vendors of plagiarism detection systems learn from the scientists and implement what the scientists design. And what are the lessons for users and for policy makers? So what we can take from plagiarism detection systems and use when designing academic integrity policies. So first of all, I will share with you some findings from the literature review. I will provide you with an overview of research on plagiarism detection in current years. I will share with you the typology of plagiarism, which is based on this literature review, and three layers of addressing plagiarism, which my colleagues and I identified. Then we will talk more in detail about these three layers. So it's methods for addressing plagiarism, tools using these methods, and policies addressing plagiarism and academic integrity. We will try to discuss some gaps and challenges. So this is the plan for upcoming 90 minutes. Overview of research. So as I already mentioned, I did a literature review on plagiarism detection. First of all, I used Google Scholar as a tool to identify the papers which might be relevant. I focused on last 5 years because in 2013 my colleagues from Germany, Norman Moischke and Bela Gibb, published their literature review on plagiarism detection. So for this, for now, the task was to find out what's new in last 5 years and how the systems changed. So we went through the titles and abstracts, excluded papers from predatory journals, and after Google Scholar, we also did the search in Web of Science to make sure that also the quality sources are not omitted. So in total, we identified 197 papers which described some experiments, some algorithm, and not only described the algorithm, but also provided some information on how well this algorithm works. Then these papers are sorted into categories, and we identified several research gaps. So how intensive is research in the area of plagiarism detection? Let's look at the number of papers, in particular years, in Google Scholar. You can see that before, let's say 2000, almost nothing happened in the area of plagiarism detection. There were some papers, there were already some methods, but after 2000, the interest in plagiarism detection started to rise steeply. And these colors correspond to keywords I put to Google Scholar. So the blue one is plagiarism detection. You can see that the word plagiarism started to be there really after 2000. Before this year, other terms were used, like copy detection, similarity detection, overlap detection. And in these terms, the rise is not so big, but in terms of in the term plagiarism, you can see that the increase is really huge. You may argue that any research or research in any area has increasing number of papers, that in general there are increasing number of documents online, of resources. So I try to compare this plagiarism detection and its synonyms with other keywords, particularly cancer, which is still the largest killer of human population, and climate change, which is the most important environmental threat. And you can see that the number of papers in this area are actually now falling down. So plagiarism detection, as we can see, is still really active research area. Well, it doesn't mean that these areas are not actively like in research. The research is still there, but we can say that the research in those areas is now quite stable, that we more or less know what to do with climate change. The other thing is that the politicians don't do it. But in terms of plagiarism, there are still new methods to explore, especially with machine learning, which is slowly going into the area. Based on the papers we have read and on the methods they are using, we tried to design this typology of plagiarism. It corresponds to the layers of human communication. If you have the written text, the lowest layer are characters. And also the most or the easiest way how to plagiarize is simply copy-paste. So it's the plagiarism which preserves characters. Sources can be possibly mentioned, and so these are some forms of cut and paste plagiarism. But this form of plagiarism is quite easy to find because it really preserves characters. So based on these characters, the plagiarism can be revealed. Then, second layer of human communication is syntax, the rules how to put these words together to form sentences. So you may plagiarize and not to preserve characters, but the syntactic structure of the sentence can still be there. You can use synonyms. Yeah, simply change some words with the same meaning, so the sentences and their structure will be still there, but the characters are not already preserved. We also put the technical disguise into this category. Sometimes plagiarists do things like that instead of spaces they put white characters there, so the text for the system looks like one long meaningless word. Or you can use characters with which look same, so-called homoglyphs. In some Russian letters have the same appearance as another Latin letters, and again, yeah, it is one of the ways how to fool the plagiarism detection systems. Then you have semantics preserving plagiarism. Some plagiarists are more active and they paraphrase the text, so they don't preserve characters, they don't preserve syntactic structure of the sentences, but the meaning is still there. And we also include translation plagiarism into this category, because translation is just one form of paraphrase. You simply took the meaning of that sentence and express it in your own words, possibly in another language. Then the top layer of human communication is idea, because the whole communication is here as a mean to transmit idea from one person to another. And also there are known cases of idea plagiarism, that someone took someone else's idea and wrote a paper on it. So even though it is really difficult or even impossible to identify, difficult or even impossible to prove, then we consider it as a form of plagiarism, because even if you take someone else's idea or if you take someone else's structure or template, you should acknowledge the original author. And if it doesn't happen, it is plagiarism, so we have it in our typology. So basically 4 layers, 3 of them correspond to layers of human communication, and the 4th one represents the idea. So, yeah, and 5th category, which is ghostwriting. So you ask someone else to write a paper for you. So again, it is a form of plagiarism, because you then are pretending to be the author. You are presenting someone else's work as your own, but it does not fit to any of these categories, because ghostwriter produces an original work. And also, this is the only category which corresponds to intrinsic ways of plagiarism detection. I will talk about that later, whereas the others are identifiable by extrinsic plagiarism detection. So here are these 3 layers of plagiarism detection, just not to be accused that I promote some of these systems. So these 3 systems are sponsors of the conference in Turkey, so that's why just these 3 are here, but there are plenty of others, other systems. I just needed to put some logos to make it more colorful, the image here. So let's talk about the layer which is at the bottom, methods for plagiarism detection. What does it mean, plagiarism detection? Yeah, that's important to understand the task, what the algorithms which are supposed to reveal plagiarism are really doing. So we have 2 categories. We have extrinsic plagiarism detection, which means that these algorithms are given a suspicious document, and their task is to select possible sources of plagiarism, find similar documents somewhere. Yeah, doesn't matter where, but in some repository. Second category, or second group of tasks, is about intrinsic plagiarism detection, which aims to identify changes of writing style. Even though the possible sources cannot be identifiable, there might be something suspicious in the document, that part of it is written in some particular style, and then you can see that the style completely changes. Even the male author can refer to himself as her. Yeah, students sometimes do that. And this is suspicious. So, and it can be also identifiable by machine, the changes of writing style. So, whereas the task of extrinsic plagiarism detection is to find similarities with other documents, the goal of intrinsic plagiarism detection is to find dissimilarities within one document. Let's now take a look more in detail in extrinsic plagiarism detection. So the former task was so-called document level detection. So to find similar documents which are similar to the suspicious documents. Later, this task split into 2 subtasks because it is not longer possible to check all the documents in the repository against the suspicious documents and find the similarities, because the repository can be really large. It's possibly whole internet. So the first stage of extrinsic plagiarism detection is so-called source retrieval. So you have the suspicious document, which is one of the input to source retrieval, and then you have search engine or some engine which in the large document collection identifies possible sources of plagiarism. So the output of this source retrieval is the set of candidate documents. And then these candidate documents go to the further analysis, which is second step and also second subtask of extrinsic plagiarism detection, so text alignment or detailed analysis. So given set of candidate documents and still the suspicious documents and the input, the task is to identify passages in those candidate documents which are similar enough to passages in that suspicious documents. And that is what you see as an output of plagiarism detection system, that you have these suspicious passages highlighted somehow with the reference to possible source of plagiarism. Another subtask of the text alignment is paraphrase identification. If the system aims to detect the same meaning, even though the text itself is completely different. So there is a task of paraphrase identification, which is defined as given 2 passages, decide whether they have same meaning or assess the extent to which they have the same or similar meaning. So this is extrinsic plagiarism detection. Intrinsic plagiarism detection, as I said, is about identification of dissimilarities within one document. So first task is called style breach detection. So you have the suspicious document and you have to identify borders between parts with different writing styles. So identify borders where the writing style changes. Then, given these passages which are already divided, another task comes, and it is author clustering. So we want to group these parts according to authorship. So we can say that this, and this was written by this person, whereas these passages are likely to be written someone else. There are some tasks related to this. It's author verification. You have, or the algorithm has, a set of documents which are written by same person, and we can be sure that they were written by same person. And then we have one suspicious document, and the task is to decide whether this suspicious document was written by the same person as these documents we had previously. So we have to verify that the author is the same. Another form of this task, or basically same task, is author identification. So we have suspicious document and then several document sets according to the authorship, and our task is to assign the suspicious document into a correct set. Of course, the verification and then identification task can be like interchangeably. You can look at verification task as a form of identification task and vice versa. And also, what is related is author profiling. So we have suspicious documents, and you have to determine some characteristics of the author: gender, age, native language, whatever you want. Yeah, there are some methods how to do it. These tasks are not only related to plagiarism detection. There are many, many other applications of very same methods. Extrinsic plagiarism detection. You want to identify reused text by journalists. Okay, this is plagiarism mostly. But patent analysis, yeah, you want to identify whether this idea or whatever has been already patented or not. Candidate retrieval does basically the same thing as recommender systems. If you buy a book and then the system recommend or download a paper from some publishing house, then the system might recommend you, well, you might be also interested in these papers because they are similar topically. So they are retrieving the candidates of possible plagiarism. They are retrieving documents which are similar to the ones. It doesn't have to be plagiarism. It's just the text similarity, but the recommender systems use the same algorithms. Detailed analysis is used in event recognition from tweets. People are sharing their feelings on Twitter, and sometimes it is possible to identify that something important happened in one place, because if there are many tweets about the same topic from one place, you can know that something happened there. And it's the analysis that the meaning of the messages is similar, so it's the same task as detailed analysis in plagiarism detection. Paraphrase identification use the same or similar methods as machine translations or short answer scoring. If you have the test and students are invited to write a short answer there, this can be with some accuracy evaluated by machine, which has to reveal the meaning of that sentence, and it's basically the task of paraphrase identification. Intrinsic plagiarism detection methods are used by spam detection. If you have an email, so the spam detectors look at some characteristics, at some writing style of that email and tell us if it is spam or not. Yeah, it's related to intrinsic plagiarism detection. Author profiling can be then used in marketing. You have the message, you have the review of the hotel or restaurant, and you want to know if it was written by man or woman, if it was written by young person or older person, to target specific product to those people. Author identification, author verification can be used for law enforcement, for identification of duplicate user account in some discussions fora or in the black market website. So as we can see, there are many applications of plagiarism detection methods. So let's now take a look at these methods more in detail. According to the typology of plagiarism, we have we use these layers to identify the typology of plagiarism detection methods. So similarity on character level is supposed to be revealed by lexical-based methods. Then we have syntax-based methods, which are looking at the similarity in sentence structure. Then we have semantics-based methods, which are identifying same or similar meaning. And then we have ensembles of methods, so combination of methods, typically machine learning, which are supposed to have better performance than those methods separately. Probably the easiest method how to identify plagiarism, which is basically implemented in all systems which I know, where the vendors tend to keep in secret the methods they use, but the algorithms or the systems I came across with, all of them use so-called n-grams. So you have consecutive characters, either consecutive characters or consecutive words. And to save space and to increase the speed, these n-grams are hashed, fingerprinted, stored in the database, and then if you have two documents, so you simply compare how many of these n-gram fingerprints are same, and this more or less tells you the percentage of similarity between those two documents. Of course, it is lexical-based methods, which works only at character level. So if you use other words, don't have to use other sentence structure. So it is quite easy to disguise this disguise plagiarism when it is revealed only by these n-grams. Then more sophisticated methods are based on the vectors. So basic idea is that you treat the text passage, it can be either sentence or paragraph, as a bag of words. So the order of words is not important. You simply put all these words together and look at the frequencies, look at the number, how many times each of the words is in that bag. So then you can look at this passage, either sentence, paragraph, or even whole document, as a vector in a high dimension vector space. So each word corresponds to dimension in that vector space. So if you have a sentence where, I don't know, there are 12 words and some of them are repeated, so there are, let's say, 10 distinct words, so you have the 10-dimensional vector space, and the frequency of words are there then coordinates of these dimensions. To make sure that the comparison of two passages makes sense, the values are usually weighted because some words appear more frequently naturally in the text, and you don't want to weight them like really too much, because these are typically so-called stop words, meaningless words like articles, modal verbs, and others. So the value of such a words is minimized by assigning proper weights. And then if you have two passages which are treated as vectors, so you can simply apply any mathematical algorithm which compares the vectors, typically a cosine similarity measure. So you have these two vectors in high-dimensional space and assess their similarity, which is basically the angle between those vectors. The lower the angle is, the higher similarity of these passages is reported. So these are lexical-based methods. Let's move to the syntax-based methods. To be able to determine syntax of the sentence, the crucial task is part of speech tagging. So we have to assign each word to its class to identify nouns, verbs, prepositions, and so on. So it's usually pre-processing for semantic analysis, but it allows us to compare also the frequencies of words or compare the similarity of words within classes. Yeah? So we don't have to compare nouns with verbs. We are just comparing nouns with nouns, verbs with verbs, which then makes the analysis, the semantic analysis, faster. Some methods, some algorithms use syntactic graphs. So it's basically the syntax analysis of sentences, which is taught at basic school, so we can identify the subject of the sentence, the action, object, and other circumstances. So this can be represented as a graph. So syntactic relations are marked, and then the structure of the sentences is compared across the document. So we can identify the sentences with similar structure, and these are then possible candidates for further analysis. I have to say that only a few papers deal with syntax-based methods only. There are quite a lot of papers which describes algorithm operating only on lexical level. There are quite a lot of papers who operate on semantic level, and these usually have this part of speech tagging as a pre-processing. We identify, I think, only 3, 4, 5 papers out of those 200 which use this class of methods as the main methods of plagiarism detection. So let's go to semantics-based methods, which are the most important, and also what I found out, the gaps, how these methods are implemented in plagiarism detection systems. So the gap is exactly here. The lexical-based methods work well. If you copy-paste something, the plagiarism detection software will find it for sure. But if you paraphrase or translate something, it is not so sure. So how these semantics-based methods are supposed to work? The probably oldest method is called latent semantic analysis, and it uses some mathematical features how to group documents by meaning. It uses this back of words, this vector analysis as a base, but then it applies so-called singular value decomposition. So the document is treated as a matrix, and this matrix is then simplified. So the dimensionality is reduced, and then it allows faster comparison of two documents by their meaning. Another method which I personally find quite interesting is explicit semantic analysis, which looks at every document as a vector of concepts. So the idea is, well, the first thing you have to do is to build so-called semantic interpreter. Quite popular base for these semantic interpreters is Wikipedia, because Wikipedia contains a lot of articles in a lot of languages, and these articles are quite well structured. So you have the articles about some topics, article A, article B, article C. In each of these articles there are some terms, and so you can identify how these topics, A, B, or C, are represented by these terms, by the frequency, how much these terms appear in that particular article. So then the semantic interpreter is basically the matrix which tells you like the lines can be the terms and columns are these topics, and inside these cells you have the numbers, so how many times the particular term occurred in an article about particular topic. So, and you can then use this matrix, this semantic interpreter, to analyze the text. So you have the text, which again contains some words, some terms, and according to this matrix, according to this semantic interpreter, you can transform the sequence of words, sequence of terms, to the vector of these topics, vector of concepts A, B, and C, because you know to what extent these words or these terms represent these topics, the headlines of Wikipedia articles. So then you have the text or text passage, and you can see that to some extent it is about the topic A, to some other extent it is about the topic B, to some other extent it's about the topic C. And then you can apply the vector comparison and use basically the same cosine similarity assessment as it was as was already explained. But the advantage of this semantic interpreter is that it is independent to particular words which are then used in the suspicious text, because the comparison itself is not done based on the words which appear in that suspicious passage, but it is done on a vector of concepts which are taken from this semantic interpreter. Yeah, so the meaning is revealed from the text using this semantic interpreter built on Wikipedia articles, and then the comparison is applied. So it's quite a promising method. Not only Wikipedia is being used as a base for this semantic interpreter, there are more sophisticated methods or more sophisticated repositories which contains also information and links between particular entities. Which moves us to next method, which is knowledge graph analysis, and then the passage of the text is interpreted as so-called semantic graph, and if you have two sentences, then the graph similarity metric can be applied. This I took from one of the papers, and it is the sentence, "I opened a new bank account." So this sentence is represented by this semantic graph. You can see that the word money is highlighted here, even though the word money doesn't appear in that sentence, "I opened a new bank account." It's not there, but of course that the sentence is about money, because the bank account refers to money. Yeah, so if you have some repository of terms and relations between them, so you can reveal that this sentence is about money, and compare the meaning with some other sentence referring to money, even though this other sentence doesn't contain the word money either. What is the problem in all these analyses, it's so-called meaning problem of the back of words. If you put all the words together and you have the sentence that Alice loves Bob and the sentence that Bob loves Alice, so these sentences are completely the same because these contain the same words. But of course, we know that the relation doesn't have to be necessarily symmetric. But the semantic analysis will not reveal that. I mentioned some tools for semantic analysis which contain these linked data. So it can be either WordNet, developed at Princeton University, which is not only the English dictionary, but there is also Thesaurus there. There is a Eurovoc, multilingual thesaurus of European languages, Wikipedia, of course, because the articles are typically in more than one language. So again, to reveal synonyms in some other languages are quite easy from Wikipedia. Wikidata is quite promising source. Maybe you can remember that if you have the Wikipedia article, on the top right corner, there are usually like extraction of the most important information. If you go to the web page about Riga, you will find some information like who is the mayor of Riga, since when, that Riga is capital of Latvia, and stuff like that. So these information are revealed from Wikidata, and if the mayor of Riga changes, it will be then immediately, this information will be then immediately available in all language modification of this site, because Wikidata repository is language independent. It contains only identifiers and links between those identifiers. We have also BabelNet, which is a similar concept. Again, is a repository of multilingual links between terms. So this was the overview of methods which are used for assessing similarity. Now let me say a couple of words about how these methods are compared, how we can see which methods work good, which methods work bad. So what we need to do is, what we need to have is a corpus, or actually we have many corpuses available. There used to be a competition on plagiarism detection algorithms where teams from all around the world submitted their algorithms, and then these were evaluated based on the corpus. So you have annotated database of documents, and you know which document was plagiarized from which source and which method was used. Microsoft provides research paraphrase corpus, so you have pairs of sentences, and their similarity is given there, so you can use this corpus to evaluate your algorithms. This is also available in German and in other languages. Basically the same method as in any clinical tests and in any evaluation methods are used. So there are two basic indicators of how good these methods are: recall and precision. So you have, for one given document, you want to reveal the sources of plagiarism. So this is the set of all these documents. These are relevant, so these are sources of plagiarism. These are not, and this is the set of documents which is identified as by the plagiarism detection methods. So we are happy that it found these. true positives. We wanted the algorithm to identify these, but also the algorithm told us that these are also possible sources of plagiarism, but when we look at them, we see that they are actually not, so false positives. There are also, of course, true negatives, the documents which are not source of the plagiarism and were not identified by the system, which is good. We want the system not to identify these. But there are also false negatives. The documents which are source of plagiarism should be identified, but they were not. So precision tells us how many selected items are relevant. So true positives in relation with all documents which were selected. And recall tells us how many relevant items are selected. So it's the fraction where it's the fraction these true positives to all these relevant documents. And of course, it's a trade-off. When you are designing the algorithm, you are designing the specific threshold, which then tells the algorithm if to report this document as a possible source of plagiarism or not. So if you want to say everything was plagiarism, so you can then reach precision, or yeah. Sorry, you will have 100% in one criteria. Then if you report no plagiarism, you will get 100% in other criteria. So what is used then is F measure, harmonic mean of recall and precision. And this is actually the number which is then used to compare which of those systems or which of those methods work better than the other. So let's take a look now to the accuracy or to this F measure of extrinsic plagiarism detection methods which are being used nowadays. So for copy-paste plagiarism, we can say that it's 100%. It is revealed quite, for sure. If you change some words, replace them by synonyms, you can. The precision is around 90%. For paraphrase identification, the accuracy is of course lower. It's about 80%, something like that. Some methods are better, some methods are worse, but it's around 80%. And it is also sometimes not easy to identify if the meaning is the same or to what extent. So this is actually measured as a correlation with human judgment. If we want to identify summary, the accuracy is even lower, 75%. For cross-language plagiarism detection as a form of paraphrase identification, it's about 70%. About structural plagiarism and idea plagiarism, I don't want to provide any numbers because there are only few of the papers dealing with that, and it's also really difficult to measure. As for intrinsic plagiarism detection methods, so these intrinsic methods are based on stylometry. So the up-to-date accuracy for style change identification, the style breach detection, it's about 60%. Then grouping by authorship, again about 60%. If you have the text in English and want to identify native language of the author, the accuracy is 65 to 85%. If you want to identify gender of author, it's actually the highest accuracy in all these tasks. So it's about 80%. If you want to identify age group, it's slightly above 50%. Some of the tools for plagiarism detection, they do this intrinsic plagiarism detection. They work, they look on the writing style, but as you can see the percentages here, it would be really dangerous if these systems report, this paper was for sure written by someone else. These systems, we can be specific. Turnitin does it, but Turnitin doesn't tell you that this was for sure written by someone else. It just indicates this might be worth further investigation. So the human then should judge if it is suspicious or not and start some procedures. Because as you can see, the accuracy is not so high. So it is pretty good to raise awareness, but it cannot be used as a judgment for some penalty or something. This intrinsic plagiarism detection methods, the stylometry, was used in quite famous case you might know. In 2013, the new book appeared. It was called Cuckoo's Calling, and it was claimed to be written by Robert Galbraith. But then the writing style of that book was quite similar to the books written by J.K. Rowling. So people started to ask, wasn't it written by J.K. Rowling? And after some stylometric analysis, which highlighted really a huge similarity with the book written by J.K. Rowling, so J.K. Rowling gave up and admitted that she actually wrote this book, and it was published under the name of her manager or editor. They made an agreement about that. So it was enough to raise awareness. It was enough to push to the author or questioned author to convince, but it couldn't be used as a proof. There is also related task which is called author obfuscation. There are software tools, and you can upload the text into that tool, and it obfuscates your writing style. So it takes the features which are used for style breach detection, for stylometric analysis, and shifts them like closer to what is average to fool these intrinsic plagiarism detectors. So this was about methods. So now we should more or less know how this method works, and now let's take a look at the tools. So how these methods are implemented in plagiarism detection tools. Again, when I was doing my literature review, I was interested in this question, so I tried to find some papers who are comparing these tools, how good they are, probably answering the natural question, which one is the best, which one my university should buy, either for given language or for given type of plagiarism, or considering other criteria. German professor Deborah Weber-Wolf did quite thorough testing in past years, but as you can see, the last testing was done in 2013, and nothing had been done in past 5 years. There were some tests done by some Indian authors, but these didn't have such a sound methodology as Professor Weber-Wolf. So, as a European network for academic integrity, we thought that we can take this opportunity that the research gap was identified here. No standardized testing is in place, and earlier this year we agreed to perform testing of contemporary plagiarism detection systems. So we have international team of people who is dealing with this topic. We already developed, we hope, sound methodology of testing. We designed the evaluation criteria. We prepared, and we hope it is good, we prepared a testing set of documents containing many European languages, containing various types of plagiarism, and also various types of sources. There is plagiarism from Wikipedia, there is plagiarism from some thesis which is available online. There is also original text to assess false positives. And there is translation plagiarism from English and possibly from other languages. So for example, Latvian set of testing documents contains translation from Russian. Czech set contains translation from Slovak language, because these languages are really similar, and a lot of Slovak students study at Czech universities. So we will see how the systems will deal with that. We invited vendors of plagiarism detection systems to participate on our testing. So far we have 20 tools who agreed to participate, and we are starting uploading documents next week. So we will run the test, then we will evaluate the outputs, and in June at the conference about plagiarism, which is going to be in Vilnius, we are going to present the results. So I cannot answer, unfortunately, now that the question which system is the best, and I don't think I will be able to answer this question after the testing. We decided not to rank the systems because it would be quite dangerous, and some criteria might be more important for some people, some other criteria might be more important for someone else. So there will be just the categories of this system, like useful system, partly useful system, and systems which we cannot recommend. And we will, of course, make the whole report publicly available, so anybody can see which system performed better in which criteria. But, of course, we know how the output of these systems look like. These systems usually provide so-called similarity protocol, which usually contains some similarity measure, typically represented as a percentage. Then you have parts of the suspicious documents which are highlighted, and there are links to possible sources. The tricky question is, what does the percentage tell us? If you have copy-paste plagiarism, so you completely copy some documents and then switch two paragraphs, what's the percentage there? Is it still 100%? But it's not the same anymore. There is some change. So shall it be less? 99, 98? Well, what number should be correct? Or if you have a paraphrase or translation, yeah, you take complete thesis, translate it to other language, is it 100%? In terms of meaning, it is 100%. But in terms of characters or words which are there, it can be 0. So 100% or less, and if less, how much? So you probably can see that the answer to the question, can the decision on plagiarism depend solely on percentage, is no, or at least I try to persuade you that it has to be no. But still, I know that there are some institutions who try to design their policies based on percentage of percentage which is reported by plagiarism detection tools. So let's say, I don't know, if the system reports the percentage less than 10-20%, you don't have to even look at the report. Yeah. Sometimes we see instructions like that. If it is above 60%, send the student to the disciplinary committee. There are some cases I would like to share. We had a diploma thesis at my university last year. The overall similarity reported by the system was 24%. Then, when you took a look to to the text and compared it with the original work, you could see that the student copied whole thesis but paraphrased everything. Yeah, not only paraphrased, he also changed the images. The original thesis was 5 years old, and he shifted the scale in the graphs to make it like more up to date, but the graphs were still the same. It was just the scale was shifted there. And the percentage was so low because the system could reveal only text matching. It did not reveal the similarity in meaning. So yeah, even though the reported similarity was 24%, in fact the similarity was 100%. I know one case from University of South Australia. They had a student assignment. The similarity reported by Turnitin was 8%, below 10%, who cares? Yeah, but the teacher cared. He looked at the similarity report and saw that whole abstract of that essay was highlighted. The rest was not highlighted, it was just the abstract. So he put the abstract to the Google and revealed the abstract on the essay mill, on the sites where the student bought the essay from. The rest was behind the paywall, so the plagiarism detection system could not access it, but obviously whole essay was downloaded and written by someone else. There was one diploma thesis in Georgia with, again, similarity was 7%, but if you looked deeper, it was a whole list of references, only list of references. The rest of the thesis was, I don't want to say okay, but it seemed like okay, but just the list of references, because the whole thesis was translated from Russian to Georgian, so the system doing text matching didn't see anything, but just the list of references was the same because they're in English and it's the same language. So again, 100% plagiarism, which looked like 7%. And another case, bachelor thesis, again at our university, similarity 89%, because student submitted his thesis to the system, then did not finish some exams, so he cannot finish his studies, did not go to the final defense, did not go to the state exam. He has to prolong for one semester. So he said, well, I'm already prolonging, so I can improve my thesis, I will make it better and upload new version. The similarity was pretty high because it was his own work. So what should we do with the student if the policy tells if it is above whatever number sent into disciplinary committee? You cannot have anything like that. So the percentage can tell you something, but it's just one of the indicators, and the policy can never rely on percentages only. Which leads up to the third layer of addressing plagiarism, and it's about policies. So, as I already mentioned, I've been involved in some projects which were dealing with policies. It was IFI project dealing with European Union, CPI project dealing with Southeast Europe, and now it's PIKE project dealing with Eastern Europe and even beyond Europe. What I can recommend are these two great books. I already talked about Professor Deborah Weber-Wolf. So she wrote a book, False Feathers. It's about academic plagiarism and interesting perspectives are there. If you have enough time for reading really thick books, so I can recommend Tracy Brettach's handbook for academic integrity. And if you don't have so much time, there is one starting point for any policy design, and it is an excellent paper, again from Tracy Brettach, called Elements of Exemplary Academic Integrity Policy, based on her research in Australian higher education area, but it is easily transferable to European context, and we can take pretty everything from that paper. So it yeah, it's not only about Australia. There are also some good papers, also some interesting papers which I identified during the literature review. As I mentioned, I was focused mostly on technical level, but in both Google Scholar and Web of Science, sometimes paper dealing with policies came up. So what I can recommend are these two. And these two papers show that systemic effort at particular university works. Curtis and Vardanega wrote a paper about their 10 years study between 2004 and 2014. During these 10 years, they introduced course on academic writing. They started using Turnitin. They also introduced new methods of assessment, implemented educational changes at this institution, and all forms of plagiarism decreased significantly. So they have the data from 2004, then they compared it with the data from 2014, and all forms decreased except recycling and ghostwriting, or now referred to as a contract cheating, which is unfortunately increasing. Another study, Owens and White, 2013, it's only less than these 10 years, it's 5-year study. Again, they implemented plagiarism detection software, both as a deterrent and as a formative tool for students. They implemented education about academic writing and authorship, and then this paper was based on a student's questionnaire on self-reported plagiarism, but again, it dropped significantly. And the finding of this paper is that the nature of assessment has a central role. So if the assessment is focused only what you memorize, then students are more likely to cheat or plagiarize. But if it is about critical thinking, then it is like students have to learn. So general findings from not only these papers but also from others are that usually one-fits-all strategy is ineffective, that you have to design the change according to needs of one particular institution, and you cannot focus only on one thing within that institution, that it has to be multi-layered approach. Any changes has to be, or any measures has to be based on evidence, and it takes some time. Nobody can expect that the institution changes till tomorrow, so a lot of effort is needed, and it is a longitudinal strategy. And really, the role of assessment is quite central. So how students are assessed, how their learning outcomes are evaluated, it plays critical role in building a culture of academic integrity. And there are two points of view which we have to have in every policy. We have to address both educational and motivational approaches for so-called good students, for those students who don't want to cheat or plagiarize, but sometimes might commit unintentional plagiarism or might be led to cheating by the others. And you have to have the deterrent strategies for, let's say, bad students. There is always some percentage of students they will try to cheat no matter what. So you have to have some measures to catch and punish them. But it can't be the main focus of academic integrity policy. Yeah? It has to be there, but the emphasis should be here at the educational approaches. And what is necessary also is the research to gather evidence and evaluate the impact of what has been done. Within the project, which was already mentioned, the IFI project, we developed so-called academic integrity maturity model, which contains 9 criteria about academic integrity maturity. It was designed to compare countries, but it can be easily used to compare institutions or courses or departments. So let me now comment a little bit more in detail about these criteria. So the system has to be transparent. Transparency is really important in order to build mutual trust. There has to be policies which are fair, effective, consistent. Especially the consistent approach is necessary. What is allowed or not allowed in one course has to be allowed or not allowed in other course, other department, other faculty. Standard range of sanctions which applies to anyone, even to the son of the dean. Software tools which has to be in place to detect plagiarism. Preventative strategies and measures. So the policy has to not only react on what happens, but also there has to be prevention which is related to communication about policies and procedures, and knowledge. It refers to education and training of teachers, education of students to avoid unintentional plagiarism or other forms of unintentional breaches of academic integrity. Training. And also research and innovation in terms of academic integrity, to gather evidence, to have the data which can then serve as a base for decisions. So when designing policies, there are some institutions who take so-called reactive approach. First, you have some problem, and it can be, I will start from the bottom, it can be either a risk of a scandal or a scandal. Unfortunately, in many universities, this is the driving force of building academic integrity policy. Our alumni is accused of plagiarism, not only accused, but committed plagiarism. How could this happen at our university? And what should we do to prevent future graduates from that? So we have to identify the problem. Are students the problem? Are teachers the problem? Are scientists the problem? Management? Where the problem is it plagiarism? Is it exam cheating, contract cheating? Is the problem that the approach of the teachers is inconsistent? So you have, or the institution has some problem, and try to solve this problem, try to address the issue. So you propose some set of measures. You can possibly take the inspiration from others, consider cultural and institutional differences, implement new regulations, put it in place, and problem might be solved or not. It can focus on either on motivation or penalties. The reactive approach usually focuses on penalties because it is based and motivated by the problem which the institution wants to solve. The other way is to focus on motivation and build a culture of academic integrity, which is actually the idea in the papers and books I've already recommended. So I will try to explain the 5 dimensions of core elements of academic integrity policy. Because if you want to build the culture of academic integrity at an institution, you need the policy, something which is written, and you can read actually what is required. But the document itself is not enough. You have to implement this policy in teaching, learning. You have to use this policy for decisions related to academic integrity, and also you have to regularly review this policy and process and adapt it to new environment, to all the changes which are there. So these 5 dimensions are access, approach, responsibility, detail, and support. Access refers to how easy is to find that policy and how easy is to read that policy. If you need to hire a lawyer to explain what is written there, or ordinary teacher, student, anybody can understand what is written there. Then approach. If the overall approach of that policy is focused on motivation and education, or is punitive, focusing on punishing of breaches. So, of course, educative approach is like more emphasized and preferred than punitive approach. Then there should be clearly defined responsibility for all stakeholders. Responsibility of students, responsibility of teachers, responsibility of researchers, course coordinators, managers, administrators. Because if you want to address some problem, you need to know who is responsible for addressing that problem. Detail to what all the issues are dealt with in that policy has to be extensive but not excessive. So the length of the policy, the length of explanation of issues should be enough for everybody to understand what it is about, but not too excessive, not too, boring or over explaining what is already there. Then the fifth dimension is about support, so it's about implementation of the policy itself, how much resources you are willing or the institution is willing to put to that policy implementation, training of teachers, students, or basically all stakeholders. So these are just the general elements. As you can see, I didn't mention what particularly should or shouldn't be in that policy. It depends on particular institution and cultural context, fields of study, and many other aspects. I just would like to point out some tools which are now being developed under the umbrella of European Network for Academic Integrity, which are coming soon and which can help higher education institutions in Europe to develop these academic integrity policies. So what is already published at the web page of European Network of Academic Integrity is glossary of terms. We put together a list of definitions related to academic integrity to make sure that everybody agrees on what we are talking about. What is almost ready and will be available within a couple of months is guidelines for academic integrity, some 80 pages documents describing these terms in glossary further in details and providing some ideas and recommendations how to deal with these topics in the academic environment. We are working quite hardly on manual for cross-sector cooperation, so how to have real-life examples and examples from future practice implemented to curricula about academic integrity or general integrity, and also this cross-sector cooperation is focused on high school teachers as well, because their students then become students of our universities. So this manual, it will be not only manual but also this set of examples, and there will be more resources which can be used by teachers in their courses, and the collection of educational materials again for teachers and for students in higher education. So it will be one big package of materials which can be used, and we hope we are able to give it to the public as a Christmas gift this year. What is coming soon? Yeah, but later, early 2019, are self-evaluation tools, tests for students, for teachers, for researchers, and for higher education management to assess academic integrity maturity, or to get some feedback on the views and opinions based on easy online questionnaires. All these tools are or will be available from the webpage of European Network for Academic Integrity, and if you are not yet subscribed in the NI newsletters, you can do it at the NI webpage. So, not to be accused for plagiarism, these are sources of all these images and ideas I took for this presentation. I would like to thank you for your attention. This is my contact details, and you can register to NI newsletter, follow European Network for Academic Integrity on Facebook or on Twitter. Thank you. And we have nice 9 minutes for questions. Yeah, there are some, please.
For a very impressive presentation.
Thank you.
I like it very much. And I don't know whether you consider my request as plagiarism or attempt of plagiarism. if I would like to ask you to share your presentation, maybe at least part of this presentation, because seriously speaking, we also have started, I would say, serious attempt to introduce culture of academic integrity at our university, and we have already established and approved by our Senate code of academic integrity. But we would like also to educate our faculty members, not educate, I wouldn't like to say educate, but just to give them some advice, some maybe good ideas how to avoid some plagiarism, how to teach our students, and so we are going next year, just in February, maybe in March, to arrange a seminar for our faculty members and say them, first of all, the importance of academic integrity, and maybe motivate them, and maybe start to establish this culture of academic integrity. And that's why if you could share with us at least maybe some part of your presentation where these books are mentioned and so, because I didn't manage to write all this. And my second question, if possible, if I'm not too long.
Let me answer. Of course, it's not a problem to share this presentation. It will be the recording of this lecture will be available online. So I will put the link to the presentation as a comment to that video, so anybody can download it. I don't have any problem with that. So you are free to use it.
We are planning to collect all presentations.
Very nice. Very nice.
And then to make them publicly available, but
Yeah.
not for all people.
Yeah, but just for participants, yeah?
And of course, if our presenters will allow.
Yeah. Thank you, Tomasz, a lot. And now my question, maybe it's not a question, but it's more my concern, but I would be more than happy to have your advice. You see, we are just like bilingual community, and a lot of our faculty members speak Russian and Latvian, and also write the research paper, could read research papers in Russian and Latvian. And speaking about this detection of plagiarism, if, for example, we could imagine the case that some hypothetical faculty member writes his research paper in Latvian by translating very nice English paper, and he translates in Latvian, and after he gives other translator or translate by himself in Russian and publish somewhere in Russia. We could never detect this, I am afraid, by our software tools, because it will be like a double transaction, if I may say.
Don't say never.
Yeah?
Currently, it is, I don't want to say not possible, but it's difficult to detect it with the current state of the art in the area of plagiarism detection. but I am pretty sure that in 5 years it will be standard operation for these tools. Yeah, you can see that now there are many cases of plagiarism which were committed actually before these tools were implemented. Nobody thought about it. My thesis will be somewhere in the library. Nobody will care. It's there. But then someone took the idea to digitalize the library and to run the plagiarism detection softwares, and these cases now arise. And it will be the same with this cross-language plagiarism detection. It's not able to detect it now, but in 5 or 10 years,
No, who
when
knows?
these
Yeah, who
people
knows?
may
Maybe
be higher
even
in the
sooner,
societal
yeah.
hierarchy, it will be detected, and it will be even more dangerous for them. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Dāvis Fredenfelds, Student Union of Latvia. I was thinking about the author identification, specifically the style changes. What happens when for the paper there are more than one author? Because in a way they have to get consensus, and if one wrote in one style and the other wrote in different style, they can come up with the different style. How do address these situations?
Well, you cannot really address these situations. I read an article which proved things which is not really surprising, that the more authors you have, the more more difficult is to distinguish the writing style. So the features kind of mix together, and you get some, let's say, average writing style, which is then really difficult to identify. So of course, and you could see the percentages of accuracy of these intrinsic methods. It might be enough to raise the awareness, but it is not enough to make a judgment. And yeah, especially in these multi-authored authored papers, it is really blurred and not clear. And also, Tomáš Foltínek writing in Czech has different writing style from Tomáš Foltínek writing in English. Tomáš Foltínek writing about computer science uses different writing style than Tomáš Foltínek writing about academic integrity, because simply the words you are using are different. So the stylometry can be used as a tool. It is something which indicates possible problem, but it's just one of the things to consider, and I believe that always will be, even if the tools are perfect. Yeah, did it answer your question? Thank you.
May I ask you, provided your nice program, which will be nice in 5 years, fixed, detected the translated plagiarism, but in fact there are two different texts. And don't you think that you move the problem from the university to the courts? I give you example. We spent 1 year of improvement that the persons just plagiarized, not translated, but synonymized text, and this was 1 year of court. Several layers of course up to one. And who will be experts at the end? Two different texts.
Yeah, I understand. If the texts are identical, then everybody can see this is identical, and it's clear. If it is paraphrased or translated, then it is more difficult to assess. Of course, but it's the same like if you copy paste just part of the thesis, is it enough to rescind the diploma or not? Of course, if the case is not clear and the person will defend themselves, it will go to the court, no matter what form of plagiarism it is. Yeah, it may happen. We had one case at our institution. It was translation plagiarism, that the person took a scientific article written in Czech language and translated it to English and published under his name. But when his head of department told him that it is going to the university ethical committee, he wanted to avoid all this public shame and quit the job by himself. And I believe that this will happen in most of the cases. But there definitely will be some cases which will go to the court, but it is not, it happens in any type of plagiarism, and it can actually happen now. Yeah, if you have this transnational plagiarism now, you don't have any software tools to support it, but you need to prove it in the court. In future, it will be easier because you can say, look, I have this plagiarism detection tool which already identified the translated or paraphrased part. So would you argue that these two sentences have different meaning? Yeah, so it will make things easier, I think. But the issues will be different, like in everything.
That's the same problem in Russia with courts. We are discussing now whether this is a task for the court to discuss the scientific questions or the ethical questions. Yeah, that's it's sort of a soft law. It's probably not. We are talking in society now that about it's not a role for the courts in the future. This maybe helps in the future to avoid this.
Neither plagiarism nor academic integrity is the area where the borders are clear. There will be always different point of view for some cases. There will be always some gray area. So that's why we have the courts to deal with this. Maybe last question, because we are running out of time.
I will try to be short, but it's a long question, actually. As a representative of a small nation, what do you think your system not kill the language? Because I'm representing Latvian Maritime Academy.
What do you mean by my system?
No, system. I mean, the plagiarism control.
Yep.
We have a problem with the technical language in Latvian because due to the history of development, some maritime technology language was not developed good enough. So, and now in the case, we push our researcher write in Latvian to develop language. From other hand, if they write in Latvian, they cannot use the same in English. And we are, it's a dilemma. Or we going with the language abroad, and lose nation language, or we develop nation language and be local.
Yeah, we have the same problem with Czech language. We are a nation of 10 million people, and again, the language is quite unique. But we are forced, of course, to publish in English because it's the scientific community communicates in English. I think that if we maintain the study programs in Czech language and we teach in Czech, even the things we previously published in English, it will the language will not suffer there. So we will have to have the Czech vocabulary even for technical issues, and I believe that the same case is for Latvian, or should be. But English is going to also other parts of the language. It's influencing all the European languages. It's being in the common vocabulary of teenagers. So let's see where the European languages are in 100 years. Nobody knows.
Why not to accept the publication?
No, there are many translated journals. Yeah, that it's no problem. Just mention that the original text was in Czech. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. There's no reason why you can't have a translation as long as you're honest about that it is a translation of an existing publication.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I will now finish the discussion because we have Salim and Shiva with a follow-up presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you just transfer this.
Okay.
just hold it in your hand.
We will in turn. Okay, I'll finish and then. Yeah.
Okay,
We are going to change it. Yeah, okay. Okay. Shall we start? Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to this session. It's great to be here with you. And after Tomasz. Very well done, Tomasz. Congratulations. Now we will continue together with Shiva related to avoiding plagiarism in academic writing. And our presentation will be dealing with from two different perspectives related to this topic. And firstly, I'll be dealing with a writing model that I developed in terms of preventing plagiarism. And later on, Shiva will be dealing with the approach from this time, the perspective of medical, biomedical science. First, I'll try to call your attention to language skills. And we would like to see the interaction among the language skills and try to see how we can teach writing, especially when it comes to writing in English. I mean, if we are talking about writing in a foreign language, then there should be something probably different from, I mean, Irene is coming. If we ask Irene to write in English, this wouldn't be a problem for her. But when we ask Shiva, this time the situation changes because it is the mother tongue for Irene, and when it comes to Shiva, it's going to be the second language. However, when you ask me to write in English, this time it's going to be a foreign language. So the case is changing. I mean, the task is the same task. We are all scholars and supposed to be writing academic papers. However, related to our mother tongues and the other languages, foreign languages that we learn or acquire, the situation changes. And here I'd like to see how this might have an impact on plagiarism issues here. Okay, as I told you, we'll be first of all dealing with the academic writing model, namely anonymous multimediated writing model, and how we try to prevent plagiarism in this model. But before we start, let's try to see what we understand from basic language skills, or in other words, main language skills. In terms of language teaching or language learning, we refer to 4 main skills. These are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, they are in order. Order of what? This is the natural order. I mean, when we think about the newly born baby, first there's exposure to listening, and then the baby is supposed to be speaking, using the language, and then attends the school, reads, and then starts to write. That's the natural order. Now, when we try to consider the development of these language skills, we see that the basic language skills, we see that we need some additional information in order to perform these language skills. What is this? This is what we understand from sub-language skills. This is the linguistic information about the language, consisting of grammar and vocabulary. We need grammar and vocabulary to listen to in the language, to speak, to write, and then to read. Okay, now let's consider the issue, the issue of basic language skills in terms of categorization. When I ask you to categorize them, what might be the categories, the 2 categories that you could produce here? Probably you will first think about spoken skills and connect listening and speaking to each other. And then you will say that, okay, there will be also written skills in which we can put reading and writing. Okay, that's good. In terms of the functions, in terms of the means of communication, we can produce such a categorization. However, in terms of understanding the role of these language skills, we need another categorization. This time, the category will be approaching differentiating the issue from receptive skills from productive skills. Listening and reading. What happens when we listen to someone or when we read something? We have exposure. We have, in other words, input. However, when we are asked to speak or write, it means that we are producing. Now, in our classes, we ask our students, if we are talking about academic writing, we ask our students to write. In other words, we ask our students to produce something. In order to be able to produce something, first of all, what do we need? We need to receive something. There must be some information, some input. That is the exposure. I mean, if our students do not have enough exposure to written materials, probably they will be experiencing difficulty in writing in especially writing in a foreign language, because they will not be familiar with the genre of academic writing here. Therefore, in the model, we will be relating especially reading and writing skills together as interactive skills. This is quite important. Okay, when we go to teaching writing, then what might be the approaches that are available in the literature? Okay, when we go back to the history, we see that product approach dominated the field for a while, and later we see genre approach. And when it comes to today's approach, basically many scholars or many lecturers have an intention of benefiting from process approach. What happens in process approach? As a lecturer, our primary concern is asking our students to generate their own ideas. Previously, we used to provide model text to our students and then ask them to produce their own text with reference to these models. They might be such as, for example, single slot substitution drills or multiple slot substitution drills. However, now we give the priority to generating ideas. How do they do this? Of course, doing it from the scratch is quite difficult, so we encourage our students to produce several drafts and then revise accordingly. In addition, we also try to provide some support. That's what we call here as scaffolding. In this way, students exchange their drafts with their peers and then provide feedback to each other. This is important here. What do we have in process writing? You see several steps involved in process writing. Previously, remember, we say that we give the priority to generating ideas. Then how do students generate ideas? First, we expect them to choose a topic that might be suitable. And then we ask them to narrow down the topic. I mean, focus on a singular aspect in the topic. And then before they start writing, we ask them to brainstorm in order to find out what they already know about the topic. And then we ask them to obtain relevant information either from the library or from the internet sources, digital sources. And then we ask them, by considering what they did in the brainstorming section and also obtaining information section, to produce their outline. This will be functioning as the basic steps, basic components of their paper. And then they write their first draft. They continue with revising by producing the second draft, and they focus on mechanical mistakes in the revision process. And then finally, they will proofread and submit the final draft to the teacher, to the lecturer. The important point here is feedback. It is quite important that we are providing feedback, high quality feedback to our students in order to help them to succeed these steps involved in process writing. Now, I'm going to illustrate, I'm going to give you some information about our department and what I do at the department. To do this, I'm going to refer to writing assignments that I deliver to my students. And here you see three of my students, they are sharing their posts against contract cheating. Today, as you know, it's the third awareness day for contract cheating. Here you see the writing assignments. You see 4 writing assignments. I'm teaching advanced reading and writing skills at the department. Indeed, this year the course is divided into 2 different sections as writing and reading skills. However, so far it used to be writing and reading combined integrated skills. In the first written assignment, I asked my students to describe their own use of metacognitive reading strategies. I have one purpose here. What is this? I'd like to encourage my students to be aware of the strategies, reading strategies that they employ. And I simply deliver the questionnaire to the students, ask them answer the questions, and then by referring to their answers, illustrate or describe their use of metacognitive reading strategies. No intake citation is necessary here. They simply report the situation from their own perspective. Because this assignment functions as a preparatory assignment for the other intake citations. This is going to be approximately 650 words. And then when it comes to the second assignment, this time I ask my students, as you see, this is a department-related topic. What is this? So, they suppose that they are teaching English, and then here they will be examining the procedure of teaching English as a foreign language to young learners by giving specific emphasis to the use of mother tongue in the classroom. They might be opposed to this argument or maybe supporting this. It's up to them. I provide 3 sources, very short chapters from books, but very, very short chapters. For this assignment, I expect my students to read only 7 pages from these 3 sources. By reading these 7 pages, they familiarize themselves with the topic, and then they prepare their outline and write the topic. What makes this assignment different from the first assignment is this time they are supposed to be blending intake citations in their papers. But no library skills are assessed here. I mean, I deliver the sources, I deliver the exact pages, and they use these pages only. In this way, I have a better control on their citation skills. And then when it comes to the third assignment, this time I blend some more detailed intake citation rules and expect them to use these rules appropriately here. Again, it's going to be related to their field, and here the assignment topic will be encouraging their students to read either in the classroom or after school. Again, the length will be similar, 650 words. I deliver 3 different sources, 3 chapters from 3 different sources. When it comes to the final assignment of the first semester, this is the first semester course, this time they deal with developing listening skills, and I give them 4 different sources. This time they have exposure to lengthy text. I mean, it's going to be about 50 pages, so they are supposed to be reading more this time. However, the length of the paper will be almost the same. So throughout the first semester assignment, I try to, in a controlled way, develop their intake citation skills. However, they do not choose their topics. When it comes to the spring semester, opposed to fourth assignment in the first semester, this time they will have a single assignment, which seems to be easy at the very beginning. What is it? Any topic. The topic is up to them. It means that different from the first semester assignments, they need to go to the library, read some articles in order to find appropriate topics, and then search for their literature, decide the topic, and follow the steps that we identified previously involved in process writing. The length will be much longer. This time it's going to be approximately 2,500 words, and they're expected to use approximately 15 reliable sources from either books or articles or the other reliable sources. Okay, I've been teaching this course for more than a decade, and Thomas, before he starts his speech, he provided some biographical information. Now I am providing some more biographical information. Why? Because this will be related to my involvement of plagiarism research. What is plagiarism? I asked this question to myself only in 2010. It was 8 years ago. Because I realized that there was something strange with my students' assignments. This is a definition. I provide a definition here in order to ensure that we are understanding the same thing. The definition here comes from American Psychological Association. They define plagiarism as the practice of claiming credit for the words, ideas, and concepts of others. So when we do not cite appropriately, it means that we are plagiarizing. And here are different types identified by Turnitin here, different types of plagiarism. However, I'm not going to go into details of different types of plagiarism. However, as Tomasz already explained, we have different types of plagiarism incidents. Now, what is the case at my university? I'll be reporting the incidence of plagiarism in the last 8 years. But to prevent you from focusing on the rest of the figure, I just ask you to kindly consider what happens here. Red color shows plagiarism, blue color shows no submission for the assignment, and green one shows total number of students. This refers to the figure in 2010. So in 2010, I realized that exactly 100 of my students out of 167. So approximately 2/3 of my students were plagiarizing. 2/3 of my students, 1, 2, 3 means that 2 of them are plagiarizing. So which is not acceptable. And it was a shocking decision for me. Indeed, I had no idea what to do. So at the first step, to provide some awareness to my students, what I did was, okay, 100 students, I asked them to repeat the course for the next year. Meanwhile, I started to search about the problem and how to provide a solution to the problem. Now, when I ask you, when I direct the question to you, what would you do in this case? I'm sure Irene has several ideas, because I'm going to refer to Irene in terms of answering this question. But in my case, for example, first of all, my first decision was asking these students to repeat the class. When we check the literature, we see that, okay, several actions, we call these actions sometimes as penalties, sometimes sanctions, sometimes outcomes. Here, what might be possible? No action. This might be the case. Verbal warning, don't do it again. Formal written warning, remedial education, blah, blah, expulsion from the institution. So we have several varieties here. So, is it enough to ask students repeat the course and then write another assignment, or simply to deliver any of the sanctions here? Probably it wouldn't work simply by referring to the sanctions. We will need to do something else. For the next year, I mean in 2011, I realized that as the institution, we had a subscription, a new subscription to Turnitin. So I thought that it would be beneficial in terms of identifying similarities in my students' assignments, because it was so time consuming to do this by Google search in the previous year. Did it work? let's see what happens. We are matched by the lecturer. I am providing feedback to Shiva. Shiva is providing feedback to my paper. Is this good? Okay, I am so happy with teachers this decision because Shiva is a very good student. However, when it comes to me, okay, I'll be providing feedback to Shiva, but he's not happy with this because I might be misleading him. My feedback might be misleading it. Then, what is my solution to these two problems here? Instead of matching students, single students to each other, I match one paper from a student with 3 peers. However, I divide my students into 3 categories. Good students, with reference to their writing skills. Good students, poor students, and the others in between. And I match one paper with one student from each group. It means that any student will be receiving feedback from a good student, from a moderate one, and from a poor one. Then what happens here? Indeed, this is what happens when we submit a paper to a journal. The editor of the journal will send our paper to reviewers. What about the quality of the reviewers? Of course, for the editor, it's not an easy task to ensure the quality, to keep the quality of the raters all the time at the same level. So sometimes the feedback that we receive from the reviewers might be contradicting with each other. This is indeed what happens here. However, this contradiction also contributes to the development of better academic writing skills. Because when we consider our department, this is English language teaching department. In other words, they will be English language teachers. They will be in the future, they will be providing feedback to their students. So this also, as a byproduct, contributes to their teaching skills, to the development of their teaching skills. And another byproduct, they also develop self-regulation skills, metacognitive skills, because they need to analyze the quality of the feedback that they are receiving and then acting appropriately here. I mean, if there is a poor student who asks something to change something in the paper and then misleading, then the student shouldn't take the step here. Instead, should provide explanation related to this feedback that it is misleading. And then resubmits as this happens as usual in any process writing approach. Another thing that I implemented into my model is I developed transparent academic writing rubric. This includes 50 items related to academic writing. There are 5 components here in it. And I implement this into feedback module. By the way, they exchange all peer feedback by using digital platform. I use Turnitin Forest. It also enables implementing a rubric and then asking students to see the items, to see 50 individual items and then provide related feedback for each item. This also contributes them to provide feedback in a more controlled manner. If you ask them to read a paper consisting of 2,500 words and then provide feedback without giving them any questions to think about, then probably it will result in failure. However, if we control the feedback that we ask them to deliver, then it will be in a better way. Another thing that we should take into consideration here is, in process writing, we ask our students to write a paper and then to provide a feedback. Then, what about the score that we give at the end of the semester? I mean, I'll be delivering their scores. If I simply take their written text into consideration, it means that I do not appreciate their efforts in providing feedback. However, it is quite important because they spend hours on providing feedback. So When it comes to scoring their assignments, I both take their written text into consideration in addition to the quality of the feedback that they delivered to their peers. In my methodology, I deliver the weight 60% to the written assignment and 40% to the quality of the feedback at the end of the semester. Okay, that's what I do in the classroom, and what we can do in our classes or at our different departments. We are talking about English language teaching department here. Probably the profile of your students or the basics or departments of your students will be different from this. However, although we do not have one-fit-all suggestion here, we can say that there are some essentials which should be taken into consideration when we are developing the curriculum. What are they? When we go back to the very early slides, we mentioned that reading and writing, they are interacted with each other. However, we need to support them with sub-skills of grammar and vocabulary. If especially we are talking about writing in English as a foreign language, then it might be a very good idea to develop academic vocabulary, for example, with our students. Therefore, dealing with academic writing corpuses and familiarizing our students with these corpuses in terms of finding synonyms in a safer way would be a good idea. In addition to referring to their grammatical skills, I mean in terms of producing more complex sentences by the help of correct linking devices, here these two appear as linguistic background information that we can provide to our students. So what about developing academic writing skills? Here I have several suggestions. For example, again, I try to relate it with developing better academic reading skills, such as, for example, they need to be familiar with the genre of the academic text. I mean, we need to show them different types of academic texts. Therefore, once our students retrieve a PhD thesis, for example, from the internet, from the library, the students should know what to read in which section of the text. Or, once the student downloads an article from a journal, she should know where to read, what to read in the paper. So she should know some information about the sections constituting academic paper, here parts of academic paper and types of academic text. Familiarity with them is quite important. And then when it comes to literature review, especially if we are asking our students to review literature, it means that they are in danger of predatory publishers. So we need to provide some skills in order to differentiate predatory publishers from reliable sources. So it is quite good idea to show some examples, especially if we refer to some indexes, for example, in terms of identifiers of the quality of the journals. This is quite good here. And then steps in process writing, such as brainstorming, outlining, drafting, revising, proofreading, and then submitting the final version, they should be included in the curriculum. We should provide some information about different writing styles. For example, in my department, I ask my students all the time to write in APA style. However, this may not be the case for your students. And if they are benefiting from the literature, it means that they will have an exposure to the text written in the other styles. And for novice authors, it's quite common to simply copy the stylistic information of the text that they are benefiting from. So it's quite important to familiarize them with different writing styles. And in-text citations, developing in-text citation skills here related to better ways of paraphrasing, quoting, and summarizing. This is important. Writing reference lists that match the in-text citations in the text. This is also important. How they should avoid plagiarism. And another way, if they are retrieving similarity reports from a text matching software, then how they can interpret this, because in the model they have the opportunity of resubmitting their assignment, which means that they will be seeing their similarity reports and then revising any problematic issues there. Another issue which might be related to copyrights is blending tables and figures that are coming from the other sources here. And finally, in the recent years, I started to give some modules on benefiting from online tools, because sometimes I see that teachers ask students do not benefit from any digital tools. I mean, they use this as a way to control their students to write appropriately. However, it's not a good idea to have such a ban. Instead, we should encourage them to benefit from such tools, but in a way that we should appreciate. Now, in the end of my...
Could I just ask you though, if by the online tools you mean things like RefWorks and EndNotes? Is that what you meant?
No, indeed, I do not ask my students to benefit from reference engines in order to write their reference entries. I ask them to write individually on Microsoft Word, but they write it individually themselves. But there are some online writing tools which might help them write better. I mean, for example, one of them is academic writing corpus. This comes from COCO. They use COCO figures there, and then they can find synonyms, and then they can check where the word exactly is used in the language. So they can check, for example, collocations, correct use of prepositions, and such other things. So I'm talking about such online tools here. Okay. Here I'm going to illustrate two sample activities which might be hopefully beneficial in terms of developing better in-text citation and referencing skills. In the first activity here, what I do is I ask my students to work on a paragraph. They are asked to paraphrase the paragraph, or if they like, they can summarize any section involved in the paragraph by blending quoted expressions. In other words, this is an activity in which students are expected to develop their in-text citation skills with reference to the three techniques involved in it: paraphrasing, quoting, and then summarizing. Here, I deliver this paragraph. This is an excerpt from Alderson. I deliver this paragraph to my students, and at the very first step, I ask them to read it carefully and understand every aspect discussed in this paragraph. Later, I ask my students to find out the main idea in this paragraph. They go back to the paragraph and find out the main idea sentence there. Later, I ask my students what author does in order to support the main idea. So these are the exact expressions coming from the paragraph. These are the expressions used by Alderson in order to support this main idea. Why is it necessary here? Because in this way, students better understand the logic of developing a coherent and unified paragraph. So they see that, okay, there is a main idea in the paragraph. The author uses some other examples in order to support this main idea. And then here they are. And later, I ask my students, do they need to quote directly? This is another activity in which we encourage them whether they need to quote directly. Because for novice authors, it's another common characteristic to overquote. they simply quote, they provide a citation, and they feel that they are in safe. However, if they are over-quoting, this is also cannot be acceptable in academic writing. So, if they have any plans to quote, they should have some strong reasons to do this. Therefore, here, if they say yes, I ask them to explain their reasons why they are quoting it here. This is the main idea. I show them the main idea once more, and I ask them how to paraphrase or how to summarize this main idea. Here, for example, in my version, instead of paraphrasing it, I thought that it could be good, it could be enough only summarize the main idea here. And later, we refer to the supporting arguments, and I ask them to paraphrase these supporting arguments. Finally, when they finish paraphrasing these arguments, I ask them connect their ideas by benefiting from linking devices, which means that they will be producing their own version. Here, as you see, we have quoted expression blended here in our suggested answer. It also includes paraphrases and summaries and quotations. So this is an activity in which we expect our students to blend all these skills in their courses. When it comes to the second activity, this time indeed I used to ask this as a final exam question in the previous years, but recently I do not deliver any examinations. What is this? This is an article which was written by Alptekin in 2007, and it was published in the Journal of Theory and Practice in Education. I deliver the article to my students, however, remove the reference list. What do I ask them? I ask them to read the article and reveal in-text citations that the author uses in the paper in order to refer to the other sources. So, the very first question is, how many sources, how many different sources do you identify in the article? They just answer the number. Let's say, for example, they say there are 12 different sources. Okay, good. What follows this? At the next step, I provide them information. You see the boxes, you see 2 boxes. They will see 15 boxes. It means that there will be information about 15 different sources. So at the next step, what do? There are 12 sources that they identified in the text, and there will be provided with 15 sources information. Now match in-text citations with the sources. Okay, it means that they will be removing 3 irrelevant ones that they shouldn't include into their reference list. And with the other 12, they will be writing their own reference entries by using the information that I provide here in the box. And sometimes I include some irrelevant information here into the box, which means that they shouldn't use this information while they are writing their reference entry. This works quite well in terms of showing our students how they should match in-text citations with reference entries. Okay, now if you'd like to see some more ideas about some activities that could be implemented into your classes, you could visit my webpage. My book is open access available there, and you can find all my lecture notes. They are freely available there. As a concluding remark here, what I want to say is integrated language skills. I mean, if you are teaching writing, we shouldn't merely depend on writing. We should combine reading and writing to each other. This year, Higher Education Council in Turkey, they made a decision and separated reading and writing skills. Now we have 2 different courses. I'm teaching writing. However, I am cooperating with reading lecturer so that we are contributing to each other. Otherwise, I mean, if we do independently different things from each other, then it's quite difficult to develop such productive skills here. And another thing, we should appreciate our students' efforts, any efforts that they are doing in the classroom or out of the classroom. This could be reading, this could be writing, this could be providing feedback, but please take this into consideration when you are allocating their scores at the end of the semester. Now it's the end of my section. I'd like to invite my colleague Shiva. He will be continuing on biomedical science issues, and if you have any questions, we will probably have time at the end of Shiva's session, so I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. I am the guy for this, responsible for this name. It's a heavily plagiarized name within my university. Everybody cut and paste, so you can call me Shiva. So Salim has been talking to you regarding the plagiarism deterrence in English language teaching. So I'm going to go the other way. Teaching out plagiarism in biomedical science is slightly different. I have a feeling that none of you are biomedical scientists, so it's better nobody will understand anything. I'll try to understand, try to be as clear as possible. Thomas, when he talk about talk about plagiarism, he said about the one size fit for all. He said it doesn't fit for all, but what I am trying to say here is it doesn't even fit for the different fields within university education, because the education is different, the scientific writing skill is different from the literature styles, and most of the scientific papers they expect in the form of third person writing, and some of them they allow first person writing as well. As far as referencing is concerned, these are the common referencing. Even the common referencing has got about 4 or 5 different styles. So Harvard system, that is what the preferred system for UK biomedical scientists, and the American Physiological Association style, and there is an APA light style, just like a molar light. You have got the APA light style as well, and also the Vancouver system. Most of the American, they like the Vancouver system. So even within the field, we have different systems. So it is one of the things I found, actually 2 of the things I found out, is whenever comes to plagiarism deterrence, most of the biomedical scientists and the medicine related subject people, they always say, go to the library and the librarian will explain to you how to avoid plagiarism. But unfortunately, librarians are mostly like my colleague Salim. They are very good in plagiarism deterrence, but they use the English as an academic language. So they are not going to give the example of scientific example to deter plagiarism. So that is one of the conflict as well. Some of the students, they always ask me, right, you always tell me that Harvard system is the one that is preferred. So why are you teaching the other ones? So we need to explain to them why we are teaching the other ones as well. I always tell them as a joke that, there are just like styles. If you wanted to wear the trouser, you can wear the trouser. If you want to wear the shorts, you can wear the shorts in summer. Or if it is somewhere in between summer and spring, you can wear the trouser with the broken ones. So likewise, whatever they express, so that means you need to know the styles of different trousers, so that whatever they ask, you can do it. So that is my style. So what I am trying to say here is that the plagiarism deterrence for a subject should be given by the subject specialist, not the English language specialist, because they will give, I'm not saying that they are not good, if anything, they are better than us, but they won't use the scientific examples. So let us go through further. So I always start with my presentation with Albert Einstein's quote about, if you knew what we are doing, it wouldn't be called research, would it? So that means we are going to, more or less, most of the time, we are going to use somebody else's work. So if you are going to somebody else's work, it's more or less exploring. Yes, in science you will have your own results. Most of the time it will be rubbish. You got to explain why it is rubbish. Right? If you wanted to explain why it is rubbish, you got to read the published information, use published methodologies, and that should be in an ethical behavior. You carry out the experiment, and also you need to have a creative ownership. That ownership means, oh, these are the results I produced, but I am using these results to justify my results. So that can only be given by a scientist. For a scientific student, this is what we wanted you to do. That's one thing. Second thing is, most of the time, I mean, Thomas was explaining about the mistakes, or even in the morning, there were so many people explaining about the mistakes normally the students do about plagiarism or avoiding plagiarism. But I have identified some of this is not the mistakes for everybody, this is a mistake for scientific people. They always have got the phenomenon, when we were students, we never do this. No, we never copy this. I got two problems with that. The first problem is, when you were student, most of the time you are an English-speaking student. You studied in England or UK or wherever, and you know how to write it. But now we got an international students, and we got students from developing countries. You got students from well-developed countries, and this is a culture of mixture of culture. So you can't say when we were students. That's one of my points. Second point is, when you were a student, it's about minimum about 20 to 40 years ago. So if it is 20 years ago, you would have worked with Windows 98. So Windows 98 doesn't have any provision for plagiarism detection. Probably you would have plagiarized, but got away with it. So don't talk about when we were students. I always tell my lecturers like that, because we are expecting high standard, because now we've got the widening participation students. They don't have any proper knowledge, but because we wanted to give that second chance to come and study to the A level, missing the A level, we got to encourage them, or we got to teach them how to avoid that. So that is one of the problem. And again, ambiguous and conflicting instruction in report writing. Okay, I want this report, I want these essays. What is the style? Go and talk to the librarian. But you are the one who is going to mark, not the librarian is going to mark. So they never give the instruction properly. And also, as I told you before, they always over-rely on the academic support service. That means librarian. They are the people. They think, oh, we are scientists. I mean, at least one of the professors told me straight face to face, I am paid here to do research and get published. Teaching is I go there and I lecture. The lecture is different from teaching. That is what his concept. But we need to change that concept as well. And another problem with the academics, especially the biomedical science academics, I'm only talking about the biomedical science academic here, they recycle the essay questions. Every year, same question. If you give every year same question, in the first year, the second year student and the first year student, because of the Facebook and all those medias, they are in contact with each other. So the chances of they plagiarizing or colluding is very, very high. So you need to change. That means we need to change first as well. And also, they misunderstand the limitation of text matching service. Even, I think day before yesterday, one of my new colleagues asked me, right, one student has got about 28%, as Thomas said, 28%, so I'm going to put it under the carpet because it's very low. I said, who said that 28% is low? Because they think that it's just like a mark, so if the mark is low, it's fine, mark is high, so that needs to be changed as well. So what I was interested in, I think I started in 2002 about I was not that keen to detect and punish the students. I was keen to teach out plagiarism. I mean, some of the things I learned from Irene, the big boss is here. But I tried to transform those things to suit the scientific students, and I'm going to show some of them. You can transform and try to suit your field if you want to. So, teaching out plagiarism, what is it? So, try to remove the chances of copying, cloning, using essay writing services. So far, I am pretty sure that I am at least about 68 to 78% successful in avoiding the essay writing services. I'll tell you why how I did it in a minute. And also, I would like to, by doing this teaching out, I would like to enhance the student engagement as well. I'll tell you in a minute how it works. Actually, it was more or less is a byproduct of what I did. I never thought that will be the results. But the limitation, the teaching out is only a tool, it's not a solution. I mean, this is I always tell to the students, unless otherwise you don't plagiarize, we can't stop you plagiarizing. And then some of the my work are really time consuming. I'll tell you and I'll give you some examples as well. So the first one I use is, you all know this is scale-up activity. We call it student-centered active learning environment with upside-down pedagogies. I heard from your rector in the morning, you are already using it. It's a fantastic tool. The only thing is you've got to invest a little bit more on producing scale-up classroom. Once the scale-up classroom is ready, then you are there, you can do it. So what I did on the scientific thing, one of the things I realized when I took over a new module, the module essay marks are very, very high. This is a coursework, an essay marks are very, very high, but there's a high levels of plagiarism detection as well. So I wanted to reduce that. So I asked the previous module leader, how did you do that? I said, they said to me, it's an essay, it's more or less a question. They got 2 weeks, they got to write the essay within the 2 weeks and then upload it and then submit it as well. So I said, okay, shall I change it? And then they agree with me. I changed it. How I changed it is the same essay question, but each essay question will have 4 subheadings, and 4 students will be working on that essay question within the class. So it's a 3-hour session. They are working within the class on one essay question, but 3 subheadings, and they will write. They can use the internet. They can use the books. It's actually the class is inside the library. Luckily, in my former university, there is a classroom actually inside it's a scale-up classroom inside the library. They can go out, bring the books, get the notes, and then they got to get the notes, and then they got to put the essay together. But because it's the subheading or subtitles are there, we can assign the marks accordingly. So, but it is really time consuming. We need academic dedication, not only me, there will be 3 or 4 lecturers going around and asking questions. The problem here is they got all the information there, online access is there, there's a tendency for them to copy and paste. So we need to go and ask questions. So it's time consuming, need academic dedication, but there will be a slight possibility of collusion as well. But it's very, very difficult in the large classes, especially in the large classes. We can't have about 300 students in the scale-up. The maximum we can have is 40. That means we are going to have 3 lots of 40 or 4 lots of 40. Then there is a chance of collusion between the first lot and probably the last lot. That's one problem as well. But so this is the scale-up activity we normally do. So these 4 students are working together. There's another one here, are working together. They got their internet access. They are taking notes. They are not cutting and pasting it. They are physically taking notes. I am interacting with them. And then whenever they want, they are contacting me. They are putting their hands up and calling me and the other educational supporters, and they are discussing with me before they're finalizing their essay. So One other thing I didn't realize that would happen is this one. So what I am going to show is, I am going to show the performance comparison of that essay writing throughout the years. So this from 2011 to 2014, these are only essays. So they take the essay, write the essay, and then upload it. And the marks are more or less same. And when the 2014, when I introduced the scale-up activity, the marks went slightly up, but it's not, there's no much change on it. So I was satisfied. Why? Because my aim is not to increase the mark. My aim is to remove the chances of plagiarizing. I am happy, but then comes the exam marks. The exam mark, because the essay they were actually discussing, they are analyzing it, they are understanding it, they understood the basic principles and the concept of whatever we taught, and therefore the exam mark, this is the formal exam mark, increased. There is no other intervention other than this that happened that year. So that is what I call a byproduct or good byproduct of this activity. The other second, that's one of my intervention. The second intervention is actually, I used it for the first year students, is a 3-minute presentation, poster presentation, because first year students, because we got loads of students, we are trying to minimize our marking a low workload. So they always say, okay, three people or 3 or 4 people give a poster presentation. And their poster, how would they look like, I will show you in a minute. The problem with poster presentation is they can just cut and paste information, because these are first year students. We can't ask we only can ask theoretical question. When you ask theoretical question, there's high chances of them cutting and pasting and plagiarizing. What I changed that is, I changed it in another way. 2 students, you can do 1 poster, but the poster should have minimal text. You got to transform your understanding in the form of flowchart. In science you can do that, and even in the other subject you can do that, in the form of flowcharts or diagram, and you got to express what you have learned in the form of diagram. So and it also enhances the self-confidence, and because in the first year they are going to stand in front of a group of students and they are going to present, but because of we don't want to scare them a lot, we said you got to present it within 3 minutes. And in my understanding, any students won't be able to summarize a poster within 3 minutes without understanding the concept. So let us show you a poster before the traditional student poster. Can you see all information? I didn't actually purposely didn't put the Turnitin, because if I put Turnitin, so everything is colored. So I didn't put the Turnitin, and you cut and pasted. So the heading was liver as a metabolic organ, and they cut and pasted 2, 3 diagrams, no explanation there, and then more or less is coming from there. Most of the information are coming from there. So this is what happened before the 3-minute presentation. Now, this is a different student. This is a second cohort. This is another year, second year. The same heading, but the different student. Remember, it's not the same student. It's a different student, because there is a limitation for the text, because there is an expectation that they got to summarize and give a presentation in 3 minutes. The poster has changed. And as far as any academic would understand, if the student to draw all these things on her own or on his own, he or she should have understood the concept. So that is one way of teaching out. I learned to be successful. And again, this is everybody does it, but unfortunately in the UK university, many of the university, they are more or less stopping us doing this, is having a Viva voice examination after a major submission. For example, it can be a final year project or dissertation or a short project, and then that will be linked with the Viva so that we can see whether the student have understood. But the problem here is still we can't make them avoid plagiarism. They might plagiarize, but at least they will try to understand things as well. And again, this is a very old methods, and most of our universities they hate this. They more or less by policy they are stopping us doing that. But I escaped when I did this as well, and really time consuming and need organization because that involves the external examiner as well. So the quality wise is good. The external examiner will ask common question or general question and then ask whether the students will understand. And also it might not be suitable for the students with social phobia. Remember that the whitening participation, the poster presentation and the Viva voice may not be suitable for students with learning difficulties. So we need to have an alternate arrangement for that as well. And the use of Turnitin, everybody is doing that now. Every single university in UK, they are doing that now. Some of them use it as a, they can, I think one of the university, they can view as much as they can. Actually, my present university, I already 1 month old now, present university, they can check as much as they can and then upload it at the last minute before deadline. The other universities say you can only look for one times and that's it. And then if you want to correct it, you can correct it. And some others, you can't even, my old university, you can't even look at it, you just upload it. We use it as not as a teaching tool, we use it as a detection tool. And there are some advantages and the disadvantages. Advantage is the good students will try to learn where they went wrong. The bad students, especially, or so-called the bad students, especially in the universities where they agree for them to look as many times as possible, they will upload, have a look and take the synonym, change it until it becomes lower. So it's both sides of this. It's a learning to avoid plagiarism or escaping detection. That's another problem. And again, you need extra resources and academic contact as well. So as far as I am concerned, assessing the skill versus comprehension, I would always look for the assessing the skill and the learning process rather than the comprehension. Anybody can memorize and recite back, but they wouldn't understand anything. So as an academic, my style is focusing on assessing the skills and learning. And again, recycle question always results in recycled answer. Don't do the recycling. And assess the understanding, not the comprehension. And try to teach out the plagiarism, but it is not an easy solution. You got to develop your own style. Everyone or every subject area would have own style that will work beautifully well on that subject area or similar subject area, but not all subject areas. So so that's what I'm trying to say. The take-home message is you got to develop. I can only show you some of the things, success stories I had, and some of the initiatives came from Irene's work, but I transformed that to suit to biomedical sciences as well. So sometimes the biomedical science and the engineering subject areas can fit in, but you need to find out your own what are they called, skills to teach out plagiarism. So again, like Thomas said, that I don't want to be accused of plagiarism on a conference about plagiarism. So the references are given there. So Salim will be here as well. If you have any questions, you can ask. Hi, sir. Hi.
Can I ask you? Oh, yes. Can I ask you, Shiva?
Yeah.
You showed us a really interesting graph to show how your students' exam
Yeah.
performance had improved. Was that sustained? Because that was...
It is certain. The reason I couldn't give the after 2013 is because I moved the university, so I need their permission to do that. It is sustained, especially the example from that's one of the success stories. They even wrote it in their annual report because it was a success story. Right? So everybody is eager to go home. This is one of the good things about going last. Nobody will ask questions.
You are so perfect.
Yeah, I can take it as well. Yeah.
I'd just like to ask a question of the audience. Do you think any of that would be useful to you? Any of the stuff you've seen today, and any feedback on how you're going to use it?
Yeah, that's what we wanted to learn because this is a mission for us. So the more people come and join us and more people incorporate whatever our ideas, these are ideas, and you can transform to yourself and then practice whatever you can practice, try to avoid. And this is what I always tell to my students that every year, but I always fail that as well. I wanted to see, before I die, I wanted to see one cohort of students passing out without a single incident of plagiarism. So far, none.
Too idealistic.
Who is ready to share your ideas? Was it useful for you both?
Thank you for today. I am Andra Fernand from Latvian Academy of Sport Education, and we have code of ethics and etc. documents, but always in life we have problems too, and every problem is different. Some of them we can avoid during the study process. Some of them rise up maybe once a time, but we should deal with this problem. And I would like to say thank you for all presenters, because we can see how to deal with this problem in different ways. Because you have own experience, and I think today we have not as in apteka recept. Yeah, we cannot take this recept to our home, but we have more ideas how to deal with this problem. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, really, thank you very much for this day. I think it was very useful and a lot of new ideas. Not sure how to use it, but definitely we will use. I'm not sure who was one of inventor of electricity. One who was saying, I don't know how electricity will be used, but I definitely know that government will put tax on it. So I'm not sure how we're going to, but definitely it will be a lot of lessons learned, and I'm especially looking for the presentation, because after that you can go through the presentation and sit in and analyze it more correctly and get some ideas. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm from Riseba University, that is Business, Art and Technology University, we both with my colleague. And I would like to stress two things that really are extremely valuable by my mind. Firstly, in the very morning we discussed with Latvian Maritime Academy rector Andrei Zvaigzne about this new managerial aspect of our, I would like to say this is managerial aspect about joining your community. Maybe it could give us a lot of new ideas, access to documents, access to new regulations or something like this. And secondly, definitely it's very interesting to know that not only us in Latvia are thinking about academic integrity and ethics and such related questions, but also Europe and the whole world. So we are very happy, more than happy to share your not to share your experience, but to listen to your experience and maybe to share with our faculty members, saying them about the importance of this particular topic. So thank you once more, and keep in touch. Thank you.
Well done.
I don't want to steal this.
Paldies. Tā, šito izslēgt.